they'll disappear you. And for breaking this rule, I'll soon find out where their victims go. I won't be able to outrun them. After all, they're not really men at all. A button hook is a handheld aid with a curve hook at one end and a handle at the other. It fastens and unfastens unyielding buttons. That's all. It's not an exciting invention, not even a particularly well-known one. Certainly not sinister in the slightest. But, even the most mundane of tools can do far from mundane things in willful hands. For context, I learned about the immigration officers of Ellis Island in history class. Men who used button hooks to intrusively inspect prospective American citizens for trachoma, a contagious eye disease that resulted in blindness when left untreated. Eyelids were peeled back like fruit skin, a ghastly procedure. These immigration officers became known as the button hook men, and they were feared by those being processed on the island. That's a horror story in itself, but not the one I'm here to tell. No, this is the story of the unearthly creatures my friends and I came to call the button hook men, influenced by our recent history lesson. These creatures have been disappearing people in my hometown, which I'll call Na Place, for 29 years. Bear in mind that the original button hook men of Ellis Island were just that, men. And men die. It's ideas that live. Stories. Monsters. Only, these aren't the fictional kind. They're real, no matter how much you might want them not to be. And if you think they won't come for you, God save your soul. Because this is bigger than my hometown. None of us will be safe for long. First, they come for someone else. Next, they come for you. Na Place is a fourth-rate crap heap, and always has been, but our economy really nosedived in the 90s. Of course, my friends and I were too young to understand why. We didn't know or care about austerity, about powerful men who bled the working class, the middle class, and even some of the upper class. It's a confusing thing, the way the world works. That's why most of us simply choose not to study the mechanisms. We only really give a hoot when life becomes expensive, hard. And isn't it the darndest thing that those responsible always make sure we point our fingers at each other? That was what broke Na Place in 1998 when I was 11 years old. And by the time the button hook men arrived, it was already too late. Tom, Perry, Julianne, and I called ourselves the Fun Four back then. We looked out for one another. Perry mostly. She was born in Na Place, but her mother, Samira, moved here from India in the late 80s, pregnant, recently widowed, and in catastrophic straits. She upheaved her life to survive, to ensure her soon-to-be-born girl would survive. Perry had a good life, mostly. She caught a few racist remarks here and there, but the Fun Four looked out for her. The trouble started to brew in '95 with the unveiling of Na Place Megamart. It quickly drove local shops out of business. And when the supermarket hired Samira, it was easy for Na Place citizens to blame her. The brown-skinned cashier. Life became scary for them, but fear came for us all on December 20th, 1998. That night, in Perry's bedroom, the Fun Four watched films on a bulky box television. It was a distraction sleepover. See, whilst we were upstairs, Perry's mother was being interrogated by Constable Harrison in the kitchen. Na Place police constable was a nice-mannered man, but a weak one. Despite his pleasantries and platitudes, he had no backbone. Case in point, Harrison was following up on a baseless accusation made by Mrs. Bradshaw, whose husband's bakery went under in '97. An accusation that Samira had used falsified information when applying for British citizenship nearly 12 years earlier. That was a lie. What film next? I asked. Body shrugged. I don't care, Joshua. Anything. Just the tears made their entrance. They're gonna make us move to India. Tom frowned. But you're not even from India? Doesn't matter. Mrs. Bradshaw called us foreign muck, and everybody agrees. Well, I don't, Julianne said. And my brother told me Mrs. Bradshaw got a Brazilian but lived a few years earlier. Should we ask the policeman to send that foreign muck back too? Tom and I chuckled, and Perry came close. An hour later, once the constable had finished his interrogation and left, Samira came up to Perry's room. Bedtime now, she said, then she nodded at Tom and me. You two will go in the spare room. Julianne, you'll sleep in here with Perry. Tom got to his feet. Yes, ma'am. I'm special, Julianne whispered to me, and I nudged her in the ribs. Perry began, Mom, what did? Not now, Beatty, her mother said, before nodding more sternly at me. Bedtime, Joshua. It's 9 o'clock. Sorry, I said, getting to my own feet and joining Tom at the door. I turned back before shutting it and smiled softly at Perry. It'll be okay, Paz. She said nothing. Instead, my friend sniffled, burrowed beneath her duvet, and flicked off the bedside lamp. Julianne remained on the carpet in that dimly moonlit room, and she spoke to me with a shrug. I don't know what to do to make all of this better, it said. I returned with a nod because I didn't know either. A still sobbing Samira closed her daughter's door, then led Tom and I across the upstairs landing. As she opened the door to the spare room, I thought of something warm to say, something that might dry her eyes. But before I had a chance, Perry's mother let out a faint croak of horror and shot her arm sideways. She was bracing Tom and me from something ahead, something in the blackness of her bedroom doorway at the end of the corridor. It was black unlike any other black. I don't know how else to put it, just as I don't know whether I turned cold as the result of Samira's sudden movement or as the result of being eyed by that doorway's colorless cavity. Whatever the case, I feared it more than anything else in the world. What's wrong, ma'am? Was Tom's timid question. Samira stood still and answered with a shake of her head, but she did not twist to face us. I didn't like that, and the longer we stood there, staring into that dark door frame, the more assured I became that something is staring back at us. Ma'am, Tom pressed, tugging on Samira's sleeve to get a response. What's in? There's nothing in the doorway, Thomas, she said before he finished the question. Then, as Samira started to shepherd us into the spare room, I glimpsed something. A silver curl glinting from the black of the doorway. I thought I'd imagined it, but as Perry's mother closed the door on Tom and me, I heard him whisper, Button Hook. I knew exactly what Tom was referencing. Ellis Island. The Button Hook men. But he had to be wrong, I decided. It was a trick of the light. It was a Button Hook man, Tom said, from the photos Mr. Langton showed us. I shook my head. No, shut up. It wasn't anything. It was... Go to bed, boys, Samira said from the other side of the door. And do not leave this room. There followed creaks of floorboards as Perry's mother crept along the hallway towards her bedroom. And then nothing. Not the sound of Samira shutting her bedroom door. Just nothing. No noise at all. What's going on? Tom said. Don't. I warned fruitlessly, knowing my friend too well. But he had already pushed down the handle and opened the bedroom door. Tom was the smartest of the fun four, but stupidly brave. He had no survival instincts. I begrudgingly chased him onto the upstairs landing, and we stopped under the glow of the orange light overhead. We eyeballed the black of Samira's bedroom. On the carpet before that threshold were her fluffy white slippers. And red droplets. What is that? I whimpered, knowing full well that it was blood. Something's happened to her, Tom said. We need to do something. We need to tell someone. The moment he uttered that final word, there sounded a dissonant clink from Samira's room. Tom looked at me, ready to do something and tell someone, and I merely whimpered with great dread as I looked over his shoulder at the doorway. The dark from within was spreading without. It gushed out of the doorframe and towards us, a black stream through a ravine of white walls. There's nothing in the doorway, Samira had promised. Well, I'd known that was a lie. Known Tom was right. We hadn't imagined the glint of silver. As the darkness engulfed us, nearly entirely extinguishing the light above, Tom turned on his heel. The two of us faced the black of the doorway, faced the figure emerging from it. It wasn't a man, much as the silver tip of his appendage wasn't a button hook, or a hand, or anything remotely of our world. But I needed a frame of reference to stop my terrified mind from unraveling entirely. So I accepted Tom's name. This was a button hook man like the ones from Ellis Island. The thing was cloaked in shade, which sloshed from its black portal and nearly drowned the light bulb entirely. I was glad of that. What I could see was already too much. This bipedal thing, with limbs tapering off into keen silver tips, each bearing a slight curve, may have had a face, a mouth, eyes, but maybe not. I try not to look too closely. Tried only to drag Tom back into the bedroom. He resisted, of course. "Where is she?" my friend asked. The button-hook man answered by wrapping bladed limbs like a noose around Tom's neck and hoisting the boy into the air. "Don't kill me," he wailed. The creature obliged. It uncoiled one of its silvery extremities from Tom's throat, then surgically jabbed at his eyes. My friend screeched louder as the button-hook man blinded him, and I screeched, selfishly, as I presumed myself to be next. When the creature finished plucking out Tom's eyes, I prayed a silent prayer for it to be over, for the inhuman thing to slink back into the shadows. But the button-hook man put its silver appendage to work again, this time driving a hook up Tom's nostril and having a riddle, fishing deeply up into my friend's head. What horrified me most was that Tom's moans of terror quickly devolved, became moans of confusion, moans of vegetative nothingness. And then the button-hook man removed its pointed limb to reveal what must have been gray matter from Tom's skull. My once wise, though admittedly foolhardy, friend had been rendered a lobotomized husk. He presumably shuffled past me, down the stairs, and out of the door. But the terrible truth is that I don't remember. I was in shock, near catatonic. I don't remember what became of him. I don't know where he went. I know only that he's not been seen since that day in 1998 because I wasn't registering anything. I was thinking only, run, I have to run, which the button-hook man proved to be true as it slashed a silver limb in my way. The thing lacerated my forearm, drawing a gash from my wrist up to my elbow and an agonized yelp from my core. The scar stays with me to this day. The feeling of that cold appendage icing not only the flesh and the bone below, but my very heart. It felt, for a moment, as if I had been changed not only physically but emotionally, as if I had become a husk of a person, blind to empathy, blind to any human thought or feeling. Pulling back from the lurching creature, I gunned for Perry's room, tore open her door, and slammed it behind me. As pounding came from the other side, I turned to find myself in another moonlit space bearing an unfolding scene of horror. Perry was lying in bed, screaming up at the face of another button-hook man towering above her. Silver reaching towards her, speaking the unspoken threat of disappearance, sending her wherever her mother had been sent. Julianne was sitting on the carpet with arms around her legs. She rocked back and forth, watched helplessly as Perry seemed poised to meet her end at the hooks of the creature from the black. "It says my mom is... she's..." Perry didn't finish any of her sentences. Julianne crawled over the floor towards me and tugged at my hand. "We need to go." I nodded and looked at the button-hook man, whose attention had shot to Julianne and me, the two loose ends threatening to escape. With that, I understood this creature. Well, of course, I didn't understand it. It was a horror from another world, one I wouldn't possibly ever hope to understand. But I understood Tom's fatal flaw. He had threatened to tattle. "Please just let us leave with her," I begged the button-hook man. "We won't tell a soul what we saw. I promise." I don't know whether it understood me. Don't know whether it even spoke our language. But I do know that the man observed me for a second, recognized my cowardice, recognized that I was telling the truth. In that moment, I had truly intended to never tell a soul. A promise I have only broken now, after nearly 3 decades. The bedroom light burst to life, and the button-hook men vanished with the dark. But the Fund 4 survived that night in body only. Tom never showed up, no matter how hard the police searched. Perry ended up in a psychiatric ward, fractured by both the disappearance of her mother and what experts called delusions of button-hook men. My cousin, Wesley, still lives in Knott Place. He says Julianne's the town drunk these days. She works as a plumber, and a damn bad one. As for me, I've lived overseas for 20 years, and I've teetered on being committed to psychiatric wards myself. Who would believe my story? Who would believe the supernatural things I saw that night? Well, people in Knott Place, apparently. I've heard things over the years. Stories from Wesley, disappearances of other citizens, strange sightings in dark doorways, unearthly things. I didn't used to care. Knott Place was on the other side of the world for me. But now it's happening everywhere. People are going missing. That's why I'm sharing my story here. You see, I've been seeing them again. In doorways, in the shade, glints of silver, outlines of things far from men. They're not upholding the deal. So what's the use in keeping hush anymore? What's the use in keeping my promise? The buttonhook men are coming for us all. I realized that yesterday when my elderly neighbor, a sweet French lady named Susie, said familiar words over coffee. There's nothing in the doorway. My heart seized in fear, much as it did back in '98, but not as sharply as it did this morning. Susie has disappeared. They're not just in Knott Place. Maybe they never were. So, I'm currently about to board a flight back to my hometown, back to see Wesley and make heads and tails of this horror. Before it makes me disappear too. Before I find out where those people went. I don't think I want to know. The airport tannoy coughed out a woman's voice that sounded like it had been dragged through gravel, then syrup. My gate number twisted on the display as if someone was dragging a magnet behind the pixels. I blinked until it snapped back to normal. People didn't notice, or they pretended not to. That's the slick, stupid lie of airports. If you don't look directly at the problem, security will handle it. Security never handles anything like this. The men's room near gate 12 had a motion sensor light. It should have blasted on when I stepped inside. Instead, I waded into a dim that stuck to my suit jacket. The hand dryer made a false start, ph, like a dying bird, then stopped. I stood at the sink, looked at myself in the mirror, and saw Susie's doorway reflected in silver. My own stall door behind me was just a rectangle of perfect black. Too black for a stall, too deep. I didn't turn around. I washed my hands in air because the tap wouldn't start, and I spoke out loud like a lunatic. I won't tell anyone. The mirror tilted me a little grin I didn't own. A boot scuffed 2 stalls down. No feet under the door. A click of something gentle and metal. No, we're not doing that here. I backed out. The sensor finally woke up. The room snapped white, and the black door was just plastic with a dent where somebody had kicked it, probably after a canceled flight. Right? Sure. On the plane, a toddler behind me kept pulling on my seat. I wanted to turn and say, "Kid, stop." But his fingers were cold when they brushed my shirt through the gap in the seats. Cold like the hook that kissed my arm when I was 11. His mother murmured, "There's nothing in the doorway, sweetheart." Over and over like she was trying to program him. I snapped the shade down, closed my eyes, and saw Tom's empty sockets at the edge of my eyelids like burned circles. We touched down in a rainy country that had never stopped apologizing for the weather. Wesley's text hit my phone before airplane mode was off. "You actually came." He was waiting at arrivals with his jaw already set for an argument. He'd grown his hair out into a man bun that made him look like a dull knife jammed into a knot. He hugged me anyway. We smelled like old cousins, same laundry detergent, different lives. "You look like shit," he said. "I feel like it. You shouldn't have posted that story." "I know. No. I mean, you really shouldn't have. It's been making people funny." We walked to the car. Rain hammered the roof and then hesitated like it was listening. Wesley drove with his elbows, cigarettes with yellow filters clenched between 2 fingers. He cracked the window. Water came in and rode cigarette smoke along the dashboard like slow fog. "What's funny?" I said. He blew smoke and didn't look at me, repeating that sentence, hearing it from kids under their breath. Parents pretending they're not scared. "There's nothing in the doorway." He flinched so hard, Ash leapt off his cigarette. "Don't. You say it, and they hear you saying it." I don't know whether that's superstition or a rule. I just know people here treat it like a switch. "Who's they to you?" He shrugged with his whole neck. "The same they as yours. The ones you ran from." We didn't talk for a mile. Knott Place hadn't changed. A few new chain stores had flapped their logos up on old brick faces, but the streets knew our names, and the houses were the same slouch they'd had in '98. The megamart squatted at the edge of town like a fat toad you dare yourself to lick. Wesley turned down Bradshaw Road with a laugh that held no humor. Guess who bought the old bakery when it went under? Don't. Her. Of course her. Old Mrs. Bradshaw turned it into something called a vintage button boutique. You can't make it up. Button boutique, I repeated, and my mouth hummed like a loose piano string. Wesley pulled up outside his place, semi-detached, front garden clean in a way that shows you he doesn't let things slide unless it's himself. He tossed me a towel off the radiator and pointed at a plastic tub on the kitchen counter. Eat. What is it? Leftover curry from Mrs. Patel. She's been feeding me because she thinks I look ill. She's right. The curry was cold and better than any apology. I ate until the burn in my mouth softened the burn from the plane. Wesley sat on the counter with his knees up, tapping his cigarette packet like he could drum coherence out of paper. You going to see her? He asked, and he didn't have to say who. If they'll let me. They won't. Last time I tried, they locked the ward doors before I got to the second check-in. Said she didn't recognize me. That's not new. I looked at the window. The glass threw me back a skin I barely recognized. She used to put her hair in plaits so tight you could see the white part of the scalp. Remember? I remember everything until I don't. He slid off the counter. Finish up. We're going out. Where? To find out why people keep saying a sentence you taught them by accident. We parked outside the Vintage Button Boutique because we were stupid or brave or both in the way that gets you killed. The bell over the door was a string of spoons welded together. It cut the air with a chime like teeth. Inside smelled of starch and damp carpet. Buttons on velvet boards in glass jars, in little dishes. Pearl, bone, bakelite, mother of pearl that came from something that had a mother. Mrs. Bradshaw had aged into the kind of woman who keeps a smile in a drawer and only gets it out when she needs to sell you something. Wesley, she sang, seeing my cousin first, because he had the kind of face you wanted to say no to. And why, if it isn't Joshua? Back from where was it? America? Australia? Wherever they fly you when you run away from home. Good morning, Mrs. Bradshaw, I said, and my mouth barely opened. She walked around the counter with a little teacup that had a chip like a missing tooth. Her eyebrows were penciled into optimism. You look thin. People always say that when they mean old. We don't say what we mean in polite society. Would you like to know who's been asking about you? No. Constable Harrison. Well, Chief Inspector Harrison now. He calls this place to check the temperature of the town. Wesley snorted. He checks if you're still angry enough to be useful. Mrs. Bradshaw's smile twitched. I check for myself. I'm a citizen of this community, not an accessory. If the two of you are here to sneer at people who stayed, there's the door. We're here about a sentence, I said. Her eyes clouded. For a second, the room felt colder, and I could hear the traffic outside like it was underwater. She set the cup down too softly. Then you should lower your voices. What does it do? Wesley asked. She held a finger up like an actress laying down the first law in a play. We were told not to say it again unless we wanted to see, which is, I suppose, the point. It's an invitation and a denial. Say it, and you push the door closed. Say it, and the door hears you. Who told you? She smiled like she'd just remembered she had teeth. Joshua, dear, if you don't know, then you haven't been listening when the house creaks. Do you remember Samira? I asked, and the name was a coin tossed too hard on a table. Mrs. Bradshaw's eyes jumped. For a heartbeat, she was a younger woman in a kitchen she'd lost. I remember every immigrant by first and last name. She didn't immigrate to you, Wesley said. She lived with us. She didn't live with you, Mrs. Bradshaw said, and now her voice was cutting fabric. She worked under you. That was the problem, wasn't it? All those years people pretending a cashier isn't a new kind of master class. Ring up your food, tell you what you owe, smile like you don't owe anything else. Where is she? I asked. Mrs. Bradshaw breathed in through her nose like she'd sniffed something burning. Gone. Where? She lifted a jar of bone buttons and swirled them. They clacked like small teeth. Into the black. "Forget it," Wesley said, grabbing my sleeve. "We're not getting anything straight from her. If she knew, she wouldn't be selling buttons like trophies." Mrs. Bradshaw put the jar down too hard. A few buttons bounced. One rolled slowly toward the backroom door. It stopped right at the crack, and then perfectly slipped under as if the floor tilted that way. "Careful," she said softly. "Don't stand in thresholds too long." Outside, Wesley swore at the rain. "She's worse than she used to be. She thinks I brought the sentence back." "Maybe you did." I didn't answer, because the door of the shop had a second shadow that wasn't mine or his. It clung to the hinge. It curved at the edge like metal strokes under black paint. "What?" Wesley said. "Drive." At the station, Harrison's office looked like it had been decorated by a brochure called Authority on a budget. He shook my hand with the exact pressure required by a small-town politician who thought he was a big city man. He looked older because we all did, but also because men who choose not to take sides age fast around the eyes. "Joshua," he said. "Wesley, the prodigal and the constant. You had a key to the Patel place back then," I said. "Did you ever change the lock?" He flicked a glance at the door as if someone might be listening for the answer. "We change when we're told to." "By who?" "The town council, the county, the home office. Pick a god." "You interrogated Samira the night she went," I said. "You called it follow-up on a community tip. Who told you to ask the question that made the answer?" Harrison folded his hands. They were clean. Too clean. We had compliance standards. If I didn't check every box, someone higher up did. "Do you want to hear me apologize for a life I didn't live?" "I want you to tell me where the missing go." He looked at the wall behind me. Somewhere over my shoulder, a clock ticked with a wound-up insistence that made my teeth hurt. "They're not missing." "What then?" Wesley asked. "Removed," Harrison said. And then he flinched because the word came out like it had crawled up his throat by itself. He tried to laugh it off and failed. Sometimes I dream in italics now. You know what that is? Words leaning into you. You wake up and you're standing in your doorway. That's since your post. Since people started saying it out loud again. I hear my wife in the bathroom at night, talking to the mirror like she's soothing a dog. "There's nothing in the doorway," I said. He put his head in his hands. His voice became a confession scratched onto a desk. "Stop saying it. Every time somebody says it, I feel like I have to check the hall. You want me to pull reports? I can, but they won't show you the thing you want. The thing you want lives between pages. It lives in floorboards and behind unlit screens." I didn't write it down because I didn't know how to spell any of it. "Pull them anyway." He did. He stacked paper until it made a dumb white tower. The files were tidy, heavy with facts that didn't weigh anything. The dates bloomed like old bruises. December 20th, 1998. December 21st, 1998. January 6th, 1999. 10 years later. 3 days ago. Names I had lived with and names I'd only ever heard over pints. Missing, presumed dead. Voluntary absence. No evidence of foul play. You could almost hear the department's shoulders shrug each time a line ended. Wesley read until his lips moved. Harrison watched both of us like he wanted to say something brave and decided he didn't have the stomach. When we stood to go, he touched my sleeve with sudden sincerity. "If you see them," he said, then swallowed, then corrected himself. "When you see them, don't look for faces. That's how they take you apart. If you make a face for them, they use it." I looked once, and for 5 minutes I thought I was talking to my brother. "You don't have a brother," Wesley said. "I know that now." We drove to the Patel house because not going felt like lying. The Megamart looked different in the daylight. A promise to the desperate, a betrayal to everyone else. We didn't stop there. Wesley turned onto the old cul-de-sac, and the house announced itself like a song you'd loved before you knew what the lyrics meant. Brown brick, a front step with the hairline crack, windows with nets that had seen too much smoke. The door opened before we knocked. A girl our age stood there, except not a girl now. A woman with badge-apologetic posture and a lanyard that used to be cheerful. Nurse. The label on her ID said community mental health in blue letters too bright for the job. You can't be here, she said. We grew up here, I said, and hated how pleading I sounded. History is not permission. Is she here? Wesley asked. The nurse's mouth made the shape of yes, and then said, no. What do you want us to do? I asked. She rubbed her eyes with thumb and forefinger like she was grinding grit out. You're the one who turned the switch back on. We didn't. You wrote it down and fed it to 1,000 years. They keep saying it, and it keeps hearing. Do you want to know what our intake forms say this month? Patient repeats statement, there's nothing in the doorway before sleep. Reports seeing deepened thresholds. Requests nightlight. The night lights don't help. What does? She laughed without any joy. We put tape over the door frames in the ward. Yellow tape. It doesn't stop anything. It's like a joke that only the punchline understands. Please leave. If you care, please leave. I'm on call every night now because the numbers. A sound came from the sitting room behind her. A soft scrape like a spoon in an empty bowl. The nurse closed her eyes, opened them, and didn't turn around. Go. I need 5 minutes, I said, just to stand at the stairs. I'll keep my eyes down. I won't touch anything. She stepped aside. I walked into our old fear like you walk back into an old coat. The hallway smelled of polish and old curry and something metallic that hadn't been there when we were kids. I put my hand on the banister. When I was little, I'd slide my palm along and hit the nick near the 7th rail where we'd banged a toy car one summer. The nick was still there. My hand missed it by an inch, like something had moved the memory slightly to the left. Don't stand in the threshold, the nurse said. If you must stand, stand in the middle of a room. Standing in a threshold is like holding a match. I stepped carefully into the living room. Same couch, different throw. The TV sat on the same stand. A mug ring on the table made a damp circle like a Portal cartoon. The doorway to the kitchen was too dark. It breathed a little, not like a person, like the sea in a dream. Wesley stayed in the hall. I could hear him fidget with the mail on the console table. The clack of a key on would make my spine itch. A whisper came from the kitchen, not a voice. The sound of metal testing the air. I looked at the carpet, brown, flattened where feet always did the same small dance. Something heavy had been dragged across it once, and then dragged back. The line was older than the dust. Joshua, the nurse said gently, like she was talking to a kid with a hammer. Please step away from that doorway. I'm not. Now. I stepped back. The dark receded a fraction like it was attached to me by a thread. When I moved, it moved, still wanting my outline. My heart tried to climb my throat. I swallowed it down so it wouldn't look out through my mouth and see what I was seeing. I'm done, I said, because I wasn't going to be brave here and I didn't need to be. On the way out, I turned my head just enough to catch a shape upstairs. The spare room door slightly open, a wedge of black inside, and something silver on the floor just beyond where the light could touch. A hairpin? A needle? There and then not. I walked faster. Back in the car, Wesley exhaled like he'd been underwater. What now? Julianne. He made a face. If she'll open the door. She did after the third knock. She leaned against the frame and squinted like we were the wrong delivery. Her hair was bleached the color of a confession in a bathroom mirror. The house behind her smelt like booze and damp towels. She smiled at Wesley and tilted her head at me. You got tall, she said. You got mean, I said, and she laughed because she knew I meant the opposite. She had always been the one who tried to paint scary things with stupid jokes. It was affectionate camouflage, and it didn't work on the enemy. We brought nothing, Wesley said, hands up, except questions. Then you brought the same thing as always. She stepped aside. Come in, but don't hang in the doorway, yeah? Bad manners these days. We sat on her couch. It sighed. She turned off a little TV playing a dating show where people pretend eating dinner with a camera in your face is normal. I read your thing, she said to me, then flicked at a stack of envelopes on the table. Twice. Once drunk and once mean. She scratched her arm, looked at her fingernails, then looked at me like she was actually looking at me. I say it so it doesn't say it first. That sentence. Is that insane? It might be sensible, I said. She nodded to herself like she'd passed a test she didn't study for. Maybe. Anyway, you want to know what I remember and what I made up to fill the hole? Or you want to know where it goes when the hall goes black? Both, Wesley said. Good, because they're the same. Memory's just a hallway with the lights off. You touch the walls until you find the door and you pray it's the right one. She lit a cigarette, dragged hard, and didn't offer us one because we were adults now. Smoke climbed in a twist. The fan didn't bother. I see them in the U-bend, she said. You ever stare down a drain? The way the dark looks wider than the pipe? They're there. They love curves. They're like things that promise to come back to themselves. Hooks, bends, door frames, arms. They don't like straight lines unless a straight line ends in a point. You sound like you've been reading, Wesley said. I mean, I'm broke, not illiterate. She tapped ash into a coffee cup. I went to the library once and got as far as a book about folk devils and scapegoats. They give you a shape to put around your fear, and then they put you through it. I've also got eyes, Wes. They don't only come from the door. They come from the corners of rooms where people leave dust. They come from the edges of screens when the pixels go dead. Do you think I don't tape the corners of my phone at night? I tape the corners of the fucking TV. I sleep with my back to the window. I talk to the doorway like it's a toddler. We're going to bed now. We're not opening you. You're just a kind of rectangle. I make my world small and square because round things listen like ears. You saw them again? I asked. She looked at my scar like it was a mouth. Last month, in the pub toilets. Someone said the sentence because the hand dryer flickered. A woman in the stall laughed, and it sounded like a sharpener. I kept my eyes on my shoes, and still something tested my ankle with something cold. I lifted my leg, and it pressed harder until I said, "Not tonight," like it was a date. Why didn't it take you? Wesley asked too quickly. Because I've got nothing they want. She looked at him until he looked away. No, that's a lie. Because I don't look. You look and you give them a face, and then they can knock and say it's you. Do you think they talk? I asked. I think they don't need to. I think we do enough of it for both sides. We were quiet long enough to hear the road outside cough up a bus. The house made a settling noise that made my ribs flinch. Julianne took another drag, stubbed the cigarette out, lit another, then put that one down without smoking it. A tremor ran through her hand. She hid it under the table like a secret. Want to come to the Megamart, she said. That's where they sell everything that leaks out of the dark. You could buy a pack of 10 for £1. What hooks? Wesley said. Door seals, she said, and laughed like it hurt. Rubber understrip. They sell peace of mind as long as you don't mind that it's fake. We went because sarcasm was easier than staying. The Megamart was fluorescent and perfumed with rot. The whole place smelt like fruit, almost ready to die. People moved like they'd been wounded a turn too tight. An announcement crackled from the ceiling and dropped a note at the end that didn't belong to any human throat. I shivered, and Wesley pretended he hadn't. In aisle 7, a woman crouched to look at the lowest shelf where they kept the discount door draft excluders. Her toddler put a hand flat against the bottom of the shelf and giggled. The mother said, without looking, "There's nothing in the doorway," and tugged him back. He started to cry. A man near us repeated the sentence under his breath like a prayer before a fight. "Listen," Julianne said. I did. The sound buried under the hum of refrigeration units was like coins turning over in someone's pocket. Metallic, expectant, a rhythm you could hook your own heartbeat to if you weren't careful. A kid in a school blazer walked past us. His friend shoved him. He laughed too loud, the laugh of boys who want to make noise so the dark can't think. He pretended to stumble into the gap between two end caps. He stopped laughing like somebody had put their hand over his mouth. He went very still. For a second, the shadow of that gap seemed to oil up an inch. I put my hand on his shoulder, not hard, because the only useful thing anybody ever did for me was touch my sleeve gently and say, "Move now." He jumped like I'd hit him. His eyes had a slice of black in the middle that wasn't pupil. "Sorry," he said, like he'd broken a plate. I didn't mean to look. Don't, I said, and he nodded as if I'd told him something kind. At the till, the cashier's hands moved fast and neat. She had a tattoo on her wrist, a circle bisected by a line, like a button with a slash. She caught me looking and flipped her hand, so I saw the other side. The line went past the circle. Not a button. Something opened. You see them, she said softly. Only when I can't help it. Don't bring them to the car. If they get in the car, you'll drive them to where you sleep. Got it. Do you? No. Then take the long way home and let the lights change your shadow. Outside, the sky was going useful gray, that color that makes you accept you'll be damp all day. We stood by Wesley's car like kids pretending not to have ciggies. Julianne took out a bottle from her bag and didn't open it, just held it like she was convincing herself she still had the option. I know where we should go, she said suddenly, eyes sharper than the minute before. Where? Wesley asked. The Megamart loading docks. The old tunnel. They built over it, but it's still there. My brother says he did temp work nights back there and saw the man walk into the shadow under a truck and come out with the wrong shoes. What's the old tunnel? I asked. Before your time, she said, which was unfair because we were the same age, but I let it go. They built a delivery tunnel so the town wouldn't see the trucks. It's at a dumb angle. Water collects. Birds die in it. I think it was the first door after the big door. The big door. Her mouth tilted in a mean smile that wasn't at me. The one we all live in. We parked behind a Megamart where the cameras pretended not to see. The loading bay stank of wet pallets, diesel, and spilled milk curdled into something like a dare. A metal door with paint flaking like old skin sat under a sign that said authorized personnel only. The S had worn off authorized, so it read authorized personnel only. Something about it made my tooth ache. Julianne led, because she'd always pretend to be fine until it cost her. She pulled at the door. It grieved open with a noise that felt like a pressure headache. Inside was a corridor you could film a crime in. Cage strip lights buzzed and then didn't, and the space between buzz and silence felt like personal time. We found the tunnel by following the tilt of the building, the way water finds a drain. It was low-ceilinged and wet as a mouth. The concrete was tamped and stained. At the far end, it went to black in a way that made my bones make small excuses to each other. Wesley held his phone up for light. Julianne smacked his hand. Don't give it a circle. It's a rectangle, he said. Everything circles when it wants to be. We stood there like idiots who'd walked into a horror film and wanted their ticket money back. The darkness at the end of the tunnel had depth. You could see it had layers. The frontmost layer breathed out, and you could feel on your tongue. Cold copper, old spoons. Behind that, a layer I couldn't describe without lying. Behind that, a place I knew the shape of because my arm remembered the curve of a hook. I heard a voice then, far behind me, from the corridor we'd come down. A woman calling, airy and casual like she dropped her kid off and turned the corner. Joshua. I turned because my name is a leash. The corridor behind us had a smear of dark in one corner where the wall and the ceiling didn't quite kiss. The voice came from there again, closer. Josh, love. It's freezing in here. My mouth forgot how to be dry. Mom died 8 years ago. Not your mother, Julianne said, motionless except her mouth. Don't talk to it. If it calls you by a name you like, don't answer. If it calls you by a name you hate, definitely don't answer. The darkness at the end of the tunnel rolled like something turning over in bed. A second voice came from the same corner, overlapping the way two radio stations fight when you drive between towns. Don't tell, Joshua, it crooned. We let you go. You didn't let me go, I said before I could stop myself. You left me to live with it. I shut up. The tunnel listened. The lights buzzed and quieted until the buzz was a kind of lullaby. Wesley touched my elbow. We've seen it, he said very carefully. Now we go. I came to make it stop, I said. Julian laughed, and it was awful. You didn't. You came because you hate yourself for leaving and love yourself for surviving. You came because confession feels like a cure until you remember it's also a hook. We don't get to make it stop. We get small and get clever. I'm tired of small. I know, she said. That's why you're back. I'm glad and I'm furious. Something moved in the dark like a thin arm, curtains swiping the air. My scar went cold as a coin in a snowbank. I stepped back without meaning to. The dark came forward as if it hadn't meant to either and was apologizing badly. We should go, Wesley said, and the word should was wet as a sob. Please. We did. We left the building without looking back, which is the bravest, most cowardly thing I know how to do. Outside, the rain had stopped and everything smelt like a road after a storm. Metallic, charged, waiting for a mistake. Back at Wesley's, the kettle clicked off and we pretended tea fixes anatomy. We sat at his small table like kids playing grown-up. He put his palms flat and stared at the wood. If we tell people not to say it, he said, they'll say it more. If we say nothing, Julianne said, the door says it to itself and then it opens. So we pick our poison, I said. Either we let the town speak and hope it's a ritual that contains it, or we shut up and hope silence is heavier than they are. There's a third thing, Julianne said, very quiet. We change the sentence. To what? She shrugged with her whole face. To anything else that means the same thing but isn't what it wants. You know how you tell kids not to look at an eclipse? You give them a shoebox with a pinhole instead. They still look. They just don't burn. You want to start a prayer, Wesley said. I want to start bad grammar. If we all say it wrong at once, maybe it trips. You think they're pedants? I said, I think they like precision. Hooks are precise, so we get sloppy. We chewed on that. It tasted like hope with a metal aftertaste. Before we could decide if we were that arrogant or that desperate, Wesley's front door rattled like someone with a key couldn't remember which way to turn. He looked at me. I looked at him. Julianne stood very still, then pointed at the ceiling light. It dimmed, not flickered, dimmed like somebody had pinched the filament. The windows went darker, not because the sky changed, but because the glass had been asked to. A voice came from the hall, too calm. Wesley, your bins are in the road. Mrs. Patel, he breathed, and then shook his head because Mrs. Patel would never use that voice to say that sentence. It wasn't a news voice. It was a theater voice. Say it, Julianne whispered. No, I said, and then hated myself because fear had stuck glue in my mouth. Say it wrong, she hissed. Now, I tried to remember any other set of words that meant the same thing. My mind did what minds do when you need a word. It threw everything except the word at me. I stood. The hall was a framed strip of deeper dark. I spoke to it like I was refusing a stranger on a train. Door's empty, I said. Nothing's borrowing my threshold. The dark breathed in. The handle of the front door twitched. A small sound, like a spoon moving on a plate, made my molars ache. Wesley stood up so hard the chair scraped. He said, doors for us, like a child inventing rules in a game. Not for you. Julianne said, no room in the doorway, as if she was making a sign with her mouth. The dark in the hall swelled and then thinned like a lung exhaling. The front door handle stopped making decisions. The light brightened until the bare bulb looked embarrassed to be naked overhead. Outside, someone actually dragged a bin and said sorry in a human voice. We stood for a long time. Then we laughed in that way you laugh after you hang up on a scam call that knew your middle name. It wasn't joy. It was survival making noise. They're listening, Julianne said. We made them stutter. How long does that last? Wesley asked. Until someone says it right again, she said, which will be in about 3 minutes on a bus somewhere, because language hates being told what to do. I thought of Susie, my neighbor with her careful accent and her careful sugar spoons, and how she'd said it plainly because she was kind and scared. I thought of all the ways the sentence would get said today, to kids, to dogs, to empty halls, and the dark like a fund into which we all pay fear. What's part 2 of your plan? I asked Julianne. That was part 2, she said. Part 1 was not dying. Part 3 then. We break something they built. We make them show us where it goes. Make who? She looked at me like she was tired of my mouth forming shapes around air. They haven't always been they. Sometimes they're people who hold doors open because they like the power. You want to find the coat the monster wears when it shops in daylight? You go to the people who sell the hangers. English, Wesley said. Bradshaw, she said back. And Harrison, and anyone else who stands by a door and says it's their job. Night manager at the Megamart. Security at the hospital. Receptionist at the council. Find the ones who tell you to wait your turn. I bet if we make one of them angry enough to say it wrong, we'll see something. You want to poke it? I said. I want to strip it, she said. Words are clothes. Let's take some off. We split duties like kids planning a heist that needed more confidence than tools. Wesley would visit the council. He had patience and a temper that only showed when it needed to. Julian would check the hospital again, tape and all. She knew how to lie to nurses to get 5 extra minutes before the security guard did his job. I would go back to Mrs. Bradshaw because I hated myself enough and because something in me wanted to hear the wrong sentence in her voice. Don't go alone, Wesley said. I'm not, I lied. The boutique's bell teeth chimed a benediction I didn't want. Mrs. Bradshaw looked up from a box of dull coins she was pretending were special. The air in there had thickened by half a degree. Back, she said. It wasn't a question. You kept her shoes, I said, because the words were on my tongue like a cut. Samira's. She didn't blink. I keep many shoes. You kept the white slippers. She smoothed the edge of her apron like she was ironing words onto it. If they left here, they left because they didn't belong. Things return to dust unless you keep them in a box. Or a jar, I said, looking at the buttons. Do you tell yourself you're preserving? Or do you tell yourself you're collecting? She straightened. Her smile became a balcony. You don't get to talk to me like that. You ran. I was a child and you were a bully, I said. If you're the same lady who called the cops on a widow, you don't get to talk to me like anything. Something moved in the curtain behind the counter. Not a person. The way a draft moves when the air itself changes its mind. Mrs. Bradshaw didn't look at it. She looked at me like she was about to scold a child for a word without paying attention to which word. Don't stand in the doorway, she said automatically. I'm not, I said and didn't move. She took a breath that went high. You say your story brought them back. You want to feel important? Fair enough. But they were here when I was a girl. They were here when my mother twisted her wedding ring because the front hall was dark. They love people like your friend's mother because people like your friend's mother keep things neat. They like edges without clutter. You want to make them leave? Give them a messy threshold. Throw shoes down. Hang a coat across. Put a chair in the way and never move it. That's what my mom did. Our hall looked like a sale. Is that why you kept the slippers? She touched the counter like it had a pulse. I kept what I could hold. Say it wrong, I said. She froze. Excuse me? The sentence. Say it wrong. Do it now. I won't. Then they'll use your mouth to say it for you. She bared her teeth in something like a snarl. It fit her better than the smile. I'm not afraid of them. You should be afraid of me. You're a man with a voice on the internet. I'm a boy who watched my friend's brain on a hook. Say it wrong. The curtain behind her swelled gently. A jar of pearl buttons rattled as if a truck went past. There was no truck. Outside, the street had settled into the slow drag of early afternoon. Inside, the air tasted of salt. Mrs. Bradshaw whispered, "Doors not yours." It came out first, thin, and almost a joke. She tightened her jaw and said it again, louder, "Doors not yours." It's mine. The jar stopped rattling. The curtain sagged on its string. The corner of the room that had been too dark softened until it was just bad lighting. I exhaled without permission. She exhaled with me, because sometimes people sink without meaning to. A man's voice came from the back room, ordinary, annoyed. "Is this where you want the box, Mrs. B?" She flinched. "Michael, put it down and come back later." He stepped out with a cardboard box and a face I knew from every small town. A man who'd had enough almost fights to be good at walking away. He looked at me, looked at her, looked at the jar of buttons like it had a gun in it, and said, "You all right?" "Fine," she snapped, and then softer, "Fine." He left. She turned back to me with a look like she'd just eaten a lemon because she wanted the vitamin C. "You're playing with grammar like it's a magic trick," she said. "It won't save you." "It saved this room for 5 seconds," I said. "That's 5 more than we had." She gripped the edge of the counter until the tips of her fingers went white. "You don't understand. They like being told no. That's the problem. They come where the rules are. They like the door because it's a rule. Open, shut, in, out. They love lines. You tell a line no, and it makes another line next to it, and now you've got a pattern. They love patterns more than anything. They're patient. They will wait until you are tired. They will wait until you forget one night and leave your hall lights off. They will wait until you are kind and tell someone afraid that there is nothing in the doorway." "Where does it go?" I said too loud. "Where do they take them?" Her eyes went small. "To sort." "Sort what?" "People," she said, and the word fell like a bead onto a hard floor. "We used to do it with forms and stamps. They do it with shadows. Same work. Cleaner hands." "Who's we?" I said. "Don't pretend your country didn't love paperwork as much as we did," she said, and then she put her hand over her mouth like something had slipped out. "Who helps him now?" She hesitated. I watched her choose which part of herself would talk. The part that spoke was not the bully. It was the citizen she thought she was when she closed her shop at night and counted the till like a prayer. "People who like to stand between other people and the thing they need," she said. "Clerks, guards, landlords, moderators, anyone who gets to say not yet or not you or wait your turn and call a job. The world is a door with a list posted on it. We keep adding names. We pretend the pen in our hand isn't a hook. You want me to say sorry? I'll say it in the old language. I am. It's not enough. They don't stop. You can help us break something," I said. "Something they use. A place they like." She laughed, and it was a broken plate. "They like everything. Pick one." Her face made the shape of thinking, and she hated that I could see it. She reached under the counter and brought out a little tin box that used to hold sweets. She slid it across to me like a bad dealer. I opened it. Inside were keys. Too many keys for one shop. One had a tag that said SVC Court Doctor, another had no tag and a bin like someone had tried to force it somewhere stubborn. One had a ribbon tied around it in a bow from another life. "The service corridor under the council," she said. "It's not for the public. It's where the building bleeds heat and secrets. The janitor used to keep spare chairs down there for overflow meetings. When they did the renovations, they left the door there. My friend dated him. He gave me a key because he liked rule breakers with lipstick. He's dead. The key isn't. If I take this, you're in," I said. "I've been in since I was 6, and my mother told the hall to behave," she said. "Get out of my shop." I took the tin and I got out. The bell bit me on the way. Wesley answered his phone on the second ring. "I've got a key," I said. "I've got 2 names," he said. The council receptionist who never smiles and the night security guy who always does. They both used the sentence without moving their mouths. "Meet me," I said. "We're going under the building." We waited until after 6. That place doesn't have a rush hour. It has a shrug hour. People drifted home. The council building looked like a stack of envelopes. The backlot where the bins lived was quiet, except for a fox who looked at us like we'd ruined his evening plans. Julianne was already there, hoodie up, jaw set, eyes making jokes she didn't want to tell. "You sure?" she said. "No," I said, "but I'm done being small." We found a service door where a pipe ran down into a concrete block like a vein. The key with the tired tag fit on the 3rd try. The door exhaled a damp, sweet breath. The corridor beyond was white brick with old graffiti painted over in beige that didn't match any decade. It smelled like mop and mouse. Our footsteps clicked and then didn't when we hit patches where water had dried into brittle skins. Halfway down, the hall sagged into an older part. The paint stopped pretending. The plaster got confident in its cracks. A door sat at the bottom of 3 steps, flush with the floor, a stupid, small geometry that made my shoulders go up. It had no handle. It had a keyhole shaped like a long thought. "Which key?" Wesley whispered. "The one with the ribbon. Julianne said immediately. The one that knows how to be pretty while it hurts. I put the ribbon key in. It turned like it had been waiting for my hand. The door didn't open. It thinned. It became less door and more idea of door. I could see dark past it where I shouldn't. Not black. A dense absence that curved when I looked at it wrong. On the bone-white brick above the door, someone had written in pencil, probably years ago, probably by a person who'd had enough of pretending. Not a shortcut. We went anyway, because that's us. Because every choice I've ever made that mattered started with a sentence I should have obeyed. The space below the door was not a room. It was a slice. It was the width of the wall and the depth of a dare. We squeezed through and came into a place that smelt like the undercarpet in a hotel that has never been renovated. The light was the kind that the body knows wasn't made for eyes. We were inside the skin of the building. Pipes like bones, wires like nerves, and a seam down the middle like a sternum. A crack between two old stones that had been plastered over 100 times and kept splitting each time the building remembered it was older than paint. From that seam, a thin fog or smoke or something without weight leaked. You could see dust motes pause in it like they were deciding if they wanted to be part of a pattern. If you looked hard, you saw the fog wasn't fog at all. It was a rhythm, breathless breathing, and tucked in that rhythm, something metallic and patient. Wish I brought salt, Julianne said. Why? To taste if the air's lying. You can taste that. You can if you've been in enough bad rooms. We moved slowly because the floor told us to. A chair sat under a duct like it was catching the drip. Another chair had 2 legs longer than the others and looked surprised about it. Against the wall, under a notice board from a renovation 3 councils ago, was a metal cabinet. It had a sticker on it with a code that nobody used anymore. I opened it because I'm a thief when I have to be. Inside were clipboards. Old. The paper had gone the yellow of an old tooth. The top page read meeting, access review. Below that, names. Some I knew, some I didn't. Next to each name, a tick. Next to a few, a small drawn circle. Someone had circled some names like they were buttons you might sew back on. What's the circle? Wesley asked. Sorted, Julianne said, not looking at the page. Picked up, moved on. Moved where? She pointed at the seam in the wall. A sound came from inside the seam like a key running slowly around a rim. My scar itched. I put the clipboard back and shut the cabinet. It didn't matter whether the paper told me what I already knew. It mattered that the cabinet was here like a reliquary. The seam widened. A vagrant breeze pushed my hair the wrong way. The dark got denser at the edges like a bruise. Something moved inside, not coming out, not going in, adjusting. I spoke because silence felt like lying down. Doors closed, I said. We're busy. The seam listened. The air tightened on the second after my words like a screw. They're here, Wesley said, and it wasn't a warning. It was a fact he needed to say, so his mouth wouldn't fill with something he didn't choose. They came in 3s at first when we were kids. That night there were 2. Today, in the building's bones, the rhythm said 3 and then 4, and then something that wasn't a number because it bent midway through. The edges of them curled into glimpses where the seam let light try to be brave. Silver that wasn't silver. The idea of hooks holding back. The patience of a hand you couldn't see. Say it wrong, Julianne said, voice whittled to a point. I couldn't think of anything except the right sentence. My body had been trained by 30 years of not saying it and 1 month of hearing it. My tongue wanted the shape that would feed the dark. I bit it. I tasted iron. Door's not hungry, I said. The seam paused. Nothing's in the hall, Wesley added. Not for us. Thresholds rented, Julianne said. No vacancies. The seam tightened like it was holding laughter. The cabinet rattled once. The chair under the duct sighed. A beetle crawled out from under the skirting and curled into a circle that looked like punctuation. The seam didn't close. It leaned forward. It became a hall, but wrong. A hall standing up inside a wall. A hall that expected feet from the other side. I could hear slippers. I could smell polish. I could hear a man cough the way men cough when they pretend they don't smoke and their wives don't know. I could hear Tom, maybe, or I made that up to punish myself. I could definitely hear a woman telling someone gently to go back to bed. Do not, Julianne said again. Command now, not plea. Do not move. Something sharp but polite touched my sleeve, like a hand moving me aside at a crowded bar. It smelled like the inside of a jeweler box. I swallowed. I didn't look. We need one of them to talk, I said. Not the dark. One of the people. Wesley nodded and took a breath like he was about to dive. He shouted, in a voice that would get a clerk's attention without getting you thrown out. Hey, meeting downstairs. Now, access review. The seam reacted, not with interest, with hunger. The word access hit it like you'd read a password aloud. The rhythm sped. I felt it in my teeth. The cabinet door popped open, paper fluttering like a stuck bird. The chair under the duct fell over with a noise like a slap. Heavy steps came on the stair behind us. We turned as one, and in the mouth of the corridor above, a man appeared with a lanyard and a face that knew how to say no so nicely you'd say thank you after. Who are you? He asked, casual, which is worse than angry. Meeting, Wesley said, pulling authority out of nowhere and wearing it like a borrowed jacket. Downstairs. Access. You're not on the list, the man said, and he smiled, and I wanted to snap his teeth with pliers. His eyes flicked past us to the seam. He didn't register surprise. He registered like you'd clock a familiar poster in a hallway. Say the sentence, I told him. Which sentence? You know which one. He considered. Why? Because if you can't say it wrong, you aren't real. He laughed, and was almost kind. There's nothing in the... Stop, Julianne said. And he did. Not because she had power, but because something in the seam tensed. He watched it. He looked back at us. He tilted his head. He tried again, mischief in his mouth now, like he was playing. There's not a thing in the threshold. The seam shivered. The rhythm hiccuped. The silver tips retreated a shade like shy animals. He smiled bigger. Happy? No, I said. But you passed. Who are you people? He said, the first time he sounded genuinely curious. We fix doors, Julianne said, and for the first time all day, I believed her. The seam behind us curled again, like it wanted to hook the words out of our mouths. The man with the lanyard took a step down the stairs, as if he had a leash around his waist, and the seam was pulling. His shoe scuffed the concrete. He made a face he probably didn't know he made when he was thinking, tongue pressed to the back of a front tooth. He looked like every middle manager I've ever resented. What happens if we don't sort? He asked, and then his eyes widened like the question had escaped. He looked at his own mouth like it belonged to someone else. What happens if we leave the door open but don't take names? You get mess, Julianne said. You hate mess. He laughed once. The light overhead hummed. He looked at the seam again. He whispered, they like it tidy, and the tone under the words was devotion and terror mixed until it was a kind of religion. If you help us, I said, we'll make it messier than you can stand. He met my eyes and chose disgust. I can't help you. Then get the fuck out of the way, Wesley said, pure and bright and mean. And for a second, I saw the 11-year-old who tried to fight shadows with fists because nobody taught us spells. The seam pulsed. The man with the lanyard winced like it had squeezed something inside his skull. He opened his mouth, and 3 different voices tried to come out. He coughed, fought, found his little human throat, and used it. If you keep saying it wrong, he whispered, it uses your breath instead. You will die out of order. What order? I asked. The one with lists, he said, and then he went very still, the way prey does when it thinks the predator can't see movement, but can see fear. Slowly, shaking, he turned toward the seam as if someone had the curve of a hook under his jaw and was guiding his face. Julian didn't let me talk. She stepped between him and the seam and became mess. She threw a bottle at the wall. It smashed and made 1,000 circles. She kicked the fallen chair so it screamed on concrete. She shouted nonsense syllables like a football chant in a language that broke its own back. She turned her hoodie inside out and put on like a lunatic. She danced 3 wrong steps in a straight corridor. She made chaos in a place designed for pipes. The seam rippled, and then, this is the only word, pouted. The silver tips slid back an inch. The rhythm lost 1 beat. The man with the lanyard gasped, as if someone had lifted a heavy hand off his chest. He ran, up the stairs, past us, out. The corridor swallowed his steps like a house that didn't want to remember him. We didn't chase. We stood in the breathing space that came after his absence. The seam quivered again, less patient now, more curious. "You better be ready," Julian said to me without moving her eyes off the dark. "If we keep doing this, it's going to invite us and to shut us up. And we're going to say yes." I swallowed. My scar burned. I thought of Tom. I thought of Samira's slippers and the little mark on the banister and the way the night smells different right before you're about to be stupid. Julian didn't wait for permission. She crab-walked toward the seam like a drunk trying to trick a breathalyzer. "If it asks, we go," she said without moving her lips much. "When they invite you, they make you polite. Don't be." It didn't invite. It gestured. The rhythm bent into an absence that looked like a mouth opening, not to speak, to swallow. The hair on my arms stood up as if each one was listening for its own name. My scar went from ache to bright metal. The breath came out of the seam cold and coppered. Beneath that, lift oil, corridor dust, the skin smell of people who've been waiting too long. Wesley grabbed my sleeve the way he used to when we were kids, and he thought I would run across the road without looking. "Do we take a rope or something?" "We take our bad grammar," Julian whispered. "We take shoes tied together so the threshold trips. We take every wrong thing we can carry." I kicked off my trainers, tied the laces together, slung them over my shoulder until they thudded between my shoulder blades like a stupid pendulum. Wesley lifted the crooked chair. Julianne took off her hoodie and tied it around her waist in a knot that didn't know what it wanted. "Doors not needed," she said. "Doors a rumor," Wesley added. "Thresholds closed for inventory," I said, and the seam quivered like we'd told it a bad joke it was too polite not to acknowledge. We stepped in. The first part is air. It presses against your face like a damp cloth. You have the feeling you're being wiped down. The second part is the feeling of stepping onto a bus that looks empty and realizing it isn't. It's full, but the full is out of phase with you. The third part, if I turned back, I wouldn't be writing this. I didn't turn back. I stepped, and my body folded through a shape my world didn't normally require. Inside, the light had the weight of paper. Not white, the off-white of envelopes. A long corridor stretched in both directions, but the word stretch lies, it didn't stretch so much as offer you perspective like a bribe. Doors on either side, not real doors. Rectangles where something darker than the gloom pooled. Some had frames. Some had lintels. Some were just a reduction of light. On a table bolted to the wall sat neat stacks of nothing, absence organized into squares. Above us, the ceiling pulsed faintly, like a lung that never got full. We weren't alone. They stood at forks like attendants, their bodies the kind your brain tries to normalize out of fear. Two-legged because we need them to be. Jointed where joints help, not where bones should be. Limbs tapering to curves that glinted like polished bone. Not hooks exactly. Hookish. If you look dead on, they are instrument. If you look from the corner of your eye, they are office furniture with a grudge. They didn't look at us. They sensed us the way a thermostat senses you. As heat, as pressure, as disorder that will eventually stop if they do their job. One turned its head, if that's what it was, and the silver at its edge caught a knot light and showed me my own face in miniature, distorted as if seen on a spoon. "Do not give them a face," Harrison had said. Too late. Mine was already stuck to a curve. I did the only thing I had. I made mess. I took the shoes off my shoulder and fired them at the nearest doorway. They hit the threshold, twisted, and fell wrong. The doorway hiccuped. A ripple went through the corridor, the kind that travels under wallpaper after a knock next door. The nearest attendant moved a curved limb with the bored efficiency of a nurse refolding a blanket. The shoes slid back into the hall, like the corridor wanted to remain tidy on a principle older than paint. "Doors taken," Julian sang, coarse and flat. "Find another rectangle." The speech didn't break them. It made them make allowances. The nearest one rotated, not ahead, something that wanted to be ahead, and archived our noise somewhere. They love rules. We were making a rule, wrongness in, wrongness out. They accommodated it like they'd moved a barrier sign to the other side of a queue. "Left," Wesley said because his panic always needs an action, and we went left because his panic had got us out of worse things than this, and because the corridor to the right had a smell I recognized. Hospitals at night, lemon and metal, and unslept sheets. The left corridor opened into a space that had never been a room and didn't need to be. Not round, not square. It had the geometry of something that was designed around a function and then forgot the function but kept the shape because the shape reassured the workers. In the middle of the space, let's call a hall, stood a desk. If you'd asked me later for the police report I would never file, I'd have to say it was a desk. It looked like someone had sharpened the idea of a desk and stuck it to the floor. Behind it, perched on a high stool, a person sat with a clipboard. Not an attendant, not a hook, a person, a woman. Hair scraped back, shirt too stiff, hands neat. She had the face of someone who had learned to mean it when she said, "I can't let you through without a pass." Her eyes were human and frightened and far away. "Good afternoon," she said, and her mouth made the words like a cashier making change even while a fire alarm sounded in the back of her skull. "Do you have a letter?" "No," I said. "We have a chair." Wesley thumped it down between us and her. The legs hit the knot floor and made a noise that sounded like a pencil snapped in half. The woman flinched. She glanced over my shoulder the way you do when you're talking to someone and your boss is behind them. "You can't leave that there," she said. "That is precisely why we left it there," Julianne replied. "Consider it a formal complaint." I stepped closer to the desk, into her space, but not enough to ring alarms and whatever passes for HR here. "Where does it go?" I asked. "The people you sort." She pressed her lips together until blood left them. "It's not called that." "What is it called?" She swallowed. "Processing." "What happens?" Her knuckles went white around the clipboard. "I register that you were here. Someone else registers that you left. If the counts match, the day is finished. And if they don't," she made the kind of small noise good women in bad jobs make when the blood leaks out of the rule. "I don't like it when they don't." I said carefully, and let the pronouns sit between us like a sharp toy. "Who are they to you?" She glanced past me again. When she looked back, some thin line in her face had moved by a hair's width, closer to humanity. "I used to call them colleagues," she said, almost apologizing to the word. "Now I think they're instruments. We hold them, but our hands are taught how to hold." "Names," Wesley said. "Do you have names?" She touched the top page of the clipboard as if to hide it. "We are taught that names confuse the count." "Where?" Julianne repeated, sharper. "Where do you put the ones you count?" "I don't put," the woman said with an ache that made my teeth hurt. "I asked them to stand where the floor is quieter. Then someone else makes an alteration. Show us the quiet floor." She looked at our shoes. She looked at the crooked chair. She looked at the seam of the wall like it was a thing she loved and hated and fed and feared. Then, with the tiny bravery of a clerk who uses a tepid kettle and calls it tea, she slid off the stool and walked with us down a short, blink-and-you-miss-it corridor to a rectangle on the floor outlined by that knot-like shadow. "Stand there," she said, voice flat with instruction, "then don't." "What happens if I do?" I asked. "You stop wanting to argue," she said, and I believed her the way a body believes cold water. "I grew up on arguing," Julianne said. "We'll stand anywhere except where you say." She stepped around the rectangle like it was a puddle. The woman's shoulders dropped half an inch. "Listen," Wesley said. "We did." From somewhere the corridor pretended didn't exist came a low chime. Not a bell. A loop of thin metal tap just right. Once, twice a pattern. And with each chime, a door further down, further in, changed its mind about being closed. We followed the chime, and the clerk didn't stop us. She looked at me with an expression that said, "Both don't and go, or you'll never stop pacing outside." She went back to her stool, because people go back to the stool even when the building is on fire. There's a comfort in posture. It's how they keep count. We reached a larger hall. This one was a place of lines. Lines drawn on the floor that meant nothing, that existed to be stood on. Along the walls, boxes. Inside, shoes. Not all white. Not all slippers. Trainers, work boots, flats with the buckles dulled by thumb. Each pair held together with a loop of something silver. Not metal. That would be too easy, like light that had learned how to be solid when it wanted. I found the slippers in the fourth box I opened. White once. Now the color of old tea. One had a patch of dried something at the toe. I picked them up and my chest filled with rainwater. Samira. I whispered before my mouth chose to be rational. "Don't say her name," Julian hissed. "Not here." I put the slippers back gently like they could bruise. Beyond the boxes, a partition. Not glass. Not anything nice. It let us see without being seen unless the room wanted to see us. Through it, people in lines. Neat lines. The kind of neat you get from fear, not charity. Some looked forward. Some stared down. Some had hands clamped to their own forearms like they were waiting for bloods. A man at the end of one line wore a high-vis vest the color of a warning and a blank face the color of compliance. His eyes were there. His mouth was there. Something wasn't. They weren't dead. They were sorted. Between the lines moved the attendants. They made no noise with their feet. They thrummed with tiny metal breath. They lifted, they tapped, they traced the air around someone's eye, and the pupil realized it could open wider than it had ever been asked. A curved end went to a nostril, like with Tom, and the body tensed and softened as a decision was made in a place no human official ever named. They weren't removing organs. They were altering access. You could see a woman take a breath and forget how to breathe in fear. You could see a teenager unclench his jaw and forget why he had wanted to clench it. You could see the flinch leave a man like it had been rented. Eyes, Wesley said softly. Nose. Mouth. The places you let things in. And out, Julianne said. In and out. In and out. They loved the door. A child in the second line saw us through the partition and lifted a hand. Argue if you want about whether she saw or simply sensed movement. The hand hovered, palm up, a question. A curved limb moved and the hand sank. The attendant didn't touch her. It didn't have to. It tightened the pattern around the child until she held herself still. I can't, Wesley said, voice raw. I can't not try. Then don't, Julianne said, and pulled a fire alarm that was not a fire alarm and made a noise I hope to never hear again outside of birth and death. The lines wavered. People looked around fast, then remembered the rectangle on the floor and stepped back into it. The attendants accelerated like a factory line, catching up to an order backlog. The air sharpened. My tongue hurt where I'd bitten it before, and I tasted iron again. Door's wrong, I shouted because not shouting felt like lending my voice to the rhythm. Doors moved, thresholds yawning. Julian bellowed, throwing one of the shoe boxes into the middle of the hall so it exploded into trainers and slippers and boots and mess. The second that box broke, a man near the partition looked at his feet like he'd seen them for the first time in an hour. He stepped off his rectangle. He took a second step. An attendant turned. The silver glanced my face, and I saw my own mouth forming my name, and I could not for a slice of second, love that reflection like a hand on my cheek. Wesley didn't look. He grabbed the man by the elbow, wrong and hard, and yanked. The man came. For 2 steps, then something invisible and curved like a polite smile hooked him behind the knee and placed him back exactly where the rectangle had been told to wait. Fuck, Wesley said in a voice you use for pain that will not become a story later. We were out of clever. Our bad sentences were damp paper. The space had adjusted to our noise like a good machine. The rhythm under the lights had lifted a gear. We were the clog. The machine notices the clock. It finds a way to count it as part of itself. Behind us, in the doorway to the knot room, a woman stood. She had a nurse's badge. Her eyes had night shift hollow. Her hands were clean from washing something off that stayed. It took me 2 breaths to register the shape of her face under 27 years. Perry, I said. The name stubbed itself on my tooth. Her mouth made a small smile that might once have been a life raft. If you say my name again, they'll underline it. She wore the wrong shoes. Hospital flats. She held them on her feet like she was sorry to disturb them. The words tore my throat coming out. Where is your mother? Perry lifted a finger halfway to her lips and put it down like she'd remembered something painful about silence. In the quiet, she said, where they put the ones who told. Alive, in a way the corridor likes, she said, and laughed, and the laugh scraped. God, Josh, I thought you were just a story people brought me like flowers. You shouldn't be here. I'm good at being here. You're not. We used to say that, didn't we? I was the one who paid attention. You were the one who ran. I'm not running. You always did eventually. Come with us. She looked at the partition like it was a well. I can't leave. I'm on shift. If I leave, they'll find me at a doorway and ask me nicely to come back. I'm so tired of being asked nicely. I can't watch this, Wesley said, and the words were a choke. He threw himself at the partition with the chair like a man trying to ram a vault with a shopping trolley. The chair smashed. It did nothing good except make the corridor swear under its breath. An attendant turned. It flowed toward him with a patience that made me want to break my own fingers just to hear a human noise. Julian didn't hesitate. She took the splintered leg of the chair and jammed it into the seam between partition and knot floor. Wedge, she said. Wedge the idea. The idea didn't want to be wedged. It flexed. It absorbed. It remembered that doors can be stuck and redefined stuck as waiting. Perry, I said louder because the hall was getting louder because the alarms and the humming were fighting for dominance. Please. She stepped backward into the shadow of the doorway she'd come through. The shadow rose a fraction, as if it had expectations. I said there was nothing in the doorway once, she said. It liked the way my voice wrapped the words. You learn quickly here which tone keeps the edges smooth. I can't forgive you for saying it, I said. I can't forgive me for not stopping you. Both things can be true. She shut her eyes. Tom's not here. Don't, I said, because the name unthreads me. I look for him, she said. For years in here time, for days out there time. I found a boy who speaks in present tense only. I found a man who doesn't know the word no anymore. I found the cleaners and the clerks and the ghosts of clerks who've gone upstairs. I didn't find Tom. If he is anywhere, he is behind a door you cannot look at. Is your mother behind that one? I asked and pointed dumbly, uselessly, at a deeper dark under an arch that had the exact height of Samir's kitchen door. Perry's eyes opened. That old brightness flared and died like a match in rain. If you go to her, you won't come back. That was always the deal, I said. I break the rule. I find out where they go. I thought you wrote that to scare yourself, she said. I did. It still counts. Julian grabbed my wrist. We do chaos and run. We cannot do hero rescue. Not in here. We are not equipped. I can't leave her twice. You didn't leave her once, Julianne said hard, like she was telling me I hadn't killed the dog after it got hit by a car. You were 11. They pulled you off the board. You were not a player. This, she gestured at the corridors at the impossible space, is a board you still can't play. Doors gentle, Wesley said suddenly, eyes wide and wet, staring at a point just past my shoulder. Doorskind. Something sharp and tender touched the back of his neck and patted, the way a mother pats a child's head when he brings the mail in. Wesley's mouth softened. His shoulders settled. His foot slid forward toward the rectangle on the ground. No, I said and grabbed him, hauled, shoved. The attending curve at his neck tightened and rolled. It didn't pierce. It pressed. The right pressure, the right angle, a touch that said, let me do this work you're tired of. Julian made a noise like a fox. She shoved her forearm between the curve and Wesley's skin. The curve pressed her. She snarled, thresholds full, and her voice tore. The curve didn't care about voice or snarl or human insistence. It cared about alignment. It cared about making a line happen where a line should be. Perry moved then. She stepped into the knot room, hands up like she was about to catch a plate. She put her fingers, bare, shaking, on the curve. It retracted, not fast, with affronted dignity, the way a teacher takes a marker bag from child. It unhooked from whatever part of Wesley's compliance it had been testing and collected itself into the edge of an attendant who watched her with a new attention. If attention can be curved, they favor me, she said, not proud, not ashamed. I say the sentences the right way. When I do, they don't have to do anything. They love not having to. Use that. Julian panted, her forearm bruising in front of my eyes. Use it to talk to the wrong door. Perry looked at me, and now she did shame. If I open a wrong door, it opens somewhere else, Josh. It opens under a bed. It opens in a cupboard. It opens at the bottom of a sleeping child's staircase. It opens somewhere a person with no voice will mistake for safety. What if you open it under me? I said. Just this once. She smiled, and there she was, the girl who used to sing out of tune on purpose. You'll fall. If a fall in verse. You haven't. She stepped backward into her doorway. The shadow leaned up like a cat at a leg. Doors behaving, she told in a tone that had soothed and sentenced 100 times. The shadow purred. That is the only word. Then she did something with her mouth I had never seen. She said the sentence wrong on purpose, and she said it like a prayer. Doors not for him, she whispered, and the shadow twisted. Under me, the floor became only mostly floor. I felt like photographs fall, in slices. The corridor removed every other frame of movement so that the fall took an hour and no time. Cold strode in my spine. My arms remembered 11 years old in the dark and flailed stupidly. The air around me had grains like paper. I hit a floor that only existed because something decided for a second that it would be kinder to have one. I was in a smaller space. No lines, no discs, no people, just boxes. Not shoe boxes. Bigger, long, low boxes that made the air cold on the bottom half of my legs. I knew, immediately, stupidly, like a frightened animal knows, what was in them. Names. I don't know how to say it without sounding ridiculous. Paper with names. Names written in big block letters. Names in small, neat cursive. Names misspelled, then corrected. Names with AKA. Names with a little star. Names with a circle. The boxes were full of forms with names and nothing else that mattered because the name is what moves the thing, and once the thing moves, the body follows. I knelt like a man in a church and sifted my hands through the pile until the edges cut me. Samira Patel. I pulled it out as if pulling her up out of water. Below, 3 more like it. The way clerks do, duplicates, triplicates, someone's carbon paper turned the wrong way. Each with a date smeared at the bottom like the ink had decided it didn't want to be counted. Each with a circle tilered in pencil. Each with a signature that wasn't hers. The room breathed. Not like the corridor. Not patient. Tired. Like an archive that has 3 floors above it and knows one day the shelving will give. In the corner, the breath thickened. The breath shaped itself around a hook. Don't you fucking dare, I said to the breath, to the hook, to the habit of the world that puts one thing on top of another until a person is underneath. You don't get to take the name again. Curved metal kissed my knuckles. It wasn't punishment. It was cataloging. My blood glistened on the curve, and for one slick second, I saw my face in it. Small and warped. And which version? The one who had not run. The one who had. I stuffed all 4 copies into my jacket. I grabbed at random. Julianne had taught me this. You take what isn't yours to make the ledger twitch. Harold, Aisha, M. Smith twice because M wears 100 hats. I jammed them into my clothes until my chest looked lopsided. The breath in the corner intensified, the way a sigh turns into an instruction. The hook withdrew like it had made a note. Something under the floor hummed, a heavier rhythm, like a machine that binds spines or cuts doctors' names into plates. I had seconds. Doors bored. I said upward to the ceiling, because somewhere up was where my friends were. Doors done with me. The floor became only partly floor again. Gravity made a choice. I went up. The boxes tried to come with me. Names tried to leave their beds. Some did. They sailed up like paper kites. The hook was busy at the corner and couldn't catch all of them. Some fell back. The room grieved and let me go. I hit the corridor floor like a man thrown out of a moving van. The air knocked itself out of me. Wesley and Julie hauled me up and swore like men hauling each other out of rivers do. Papers went everywhere. Names fluttered down. Some slid under door frames like field mice. Some stuck to the knot floor. Some, this is either bleakly funny or not, got caught on the curves of attendants passing and rode there like shopping lists on trolley handles. Perry stood at her doorway, mouth set, eyes wrecked. "You idiot," she said. It was the kind of affection we used to afford each other. "Is she?" I began and held up the forms like an offering. "This doesn't take her out," she said. "This takes a record out. It buys moments. It confuses the count. It makes them stop by a bathroom on the way to belonging, and then they might look in the mirror and remember their real name again and pick up the wrong shoe." "Moments," I said hollowly. "Moments," she agreed. "We love them. They're all we have." A chime went through the corridor again. Not the thin one. A heavier bell. Feeding bell. Summon bell. The attendants turned with the grace of knives being lifted from velvet. The partition shivered as if glass had been reminded of its old job. The quiet rectangle on the floor near us lit from within. Not with light, with attention. "They've counted us," Julianne said. "Of course they have." "Door's not for us," Wesley said, and his voice shook but held. 5 attendants moved. Not toward me, toward the names on the floor. They used their curves to shepherd paper. It was terrible in a banal way, watching something inhuman do paperwork. A curve under a sheet, a curl flipped, a glide of thumbnail-sharp steel aligning the stack. Efficient, elegant, final. Perry stepped between them and the paper. She didn't touch. She spoke. "Not that pile," she said, gentle as dishwater. "That pile is not to be processed. That pile is irregular. That pile is for additional review." They paused. She knew their office language. She had become it, enough to turn its shape to our use for a second. One curved limb quivered, nearly argued. Another tilted, nearly escalated. A third turned its knot face to her face, and I saw, for a second, the outline of something that might be called approval. "Now," Julian breathed in my ear. "We leave." I reached for Perry. She shook her head with a ferocity that made my hand drop. "I have to stay. I can buy more moments from here than I can from out there. You'll be eaten. We're all eaten. Some of us get to throw things at the teeth while we go. Some." "Don't," she said, and her mouth trembled. "You'll make me say it, and I don't want to see what happens when I say her name in here. Take the names. Go." The corridor tilted important. The alarm I'd pulled, or not pulled, or willed in a noise changed key. The space noticed our refusal to be finished and invented interest charges. A shadow at the end of the hall lifted like a curtain about to reveal the next act. "We go," Wesley said, and he wasn't talking to me. He was talking to Julianne. He was telling her to get me out because if he said it to me, I would argue, and we didn't have time for a fight, even a good one. We ran a coward's run. Heads down, paper jammed in jackets, bad sentences in our mouths like talismans that were just sounds. Thresholds closed, we chorused. Doors bored. No room. Corridors sick. Rectangles broken. We threw these on the floor like nails. Some bent. Some went through a tire. Attendants moved, not quite fast enough to cut us. We made mess. That matters more than heroics. Mrs. Bradshaw was right. Clutter your hall. Confuse the accounting. We hit the first corner like water. We hit the second like men who had learned that the building you grew up in will always keep a bruise the shape of your child's head. At the seam, the knot door rolled its lip. It liked us. It wanted to continue the conversation. It wanted to show us a thing we would never be able to forget. It invited without inviting. It opened like the end of a sentence that just keeps adding commas to pretend it isn't over. Doors upstairs. I lied half to it, half to me, and we jumped. We came out into the service corridor. The real door? The solid one? It was open and the air tasted like a hand you can hold. The fox in the lot outside stood on a bin and watched us surge out like we were the evening's television. The sky had bled into that ugly, deep blue that looks like a bruise you don't want to explain. We slammed the door because that's what you do. It did nothing except tell the hinge we were done with it for now. Julian bent double and laughed and nearly vomited. Wesley held the knob with both hands like it could steady him. I leaned on the concrete and shook in a way that felt like a rehearsal for something worse. The tins in my jacket, the names bruised my ribs like fingers. We took them to Wesley's car, like we were carrying someone drunk between the two of us. We threw them in the boot because there was nowhere better. We didn't drive right away. We sat. We let the engine do that comforting pretend animal purr. I put my forehead on the steering wheel and felt old, then young, then old. What now? Wesley said, which is the question always and forever, and I hated it. We copy them, Julian said. We post them. We make the count wrong in a way that lives on photocopiers. I chew my lip. Posting names will get people hurt. They're already hurt, she said, not as a line, as a diagnosis. We have to be public and wrong at the same time. That's how you break a ritual. You make several new bad ones, and you make them loud. And you? I asked. She grinned in that mean way that turned leftover fear into usefulness. I'll go to the pub toilets and make sure the hand dryer is broken for a week. I'll make a pile of shoes in every hall at the council. I'll tape everyone's door frames with the tape the night staff hate. I'll fight with nurses about night lights. I'll pronounce things wrong to whoever will listen. I'll be a pain in the throat of this place until it coughs up something we can use. Body, Wesley said carefully. I didn't answer because my mouth had decided noise would break it. Julian did. She's in the only place where buying moments doesn't look like madness. We drove. We dropped Julianne at her door. She kissed my cheek like you kiss a brother you argued with. Text me when your heartbeat stops trying to sprint. We meet again when you can come into a room without bringing an invitation. You think it follows? I asked. She tilted her head. You smell like the corridor. Air carries. At Wesley's, we spread the forms on his kitchen table like we were decorating for a party with a theme we hated. Names in biro. Names in pencil. Names with thick stamping. I photographed everything like I was a tourist at a war memorial. My hands shook and the focus hated me. We scammed what we could badly. We emailed them nowhere in particular and everywhere we knew. We printed 3 copies and hid them in stupid places, behind the boiler, under the couch, inside the cereal. At 2 in the morning, the house did that thing old houses do. Remember how to breathe separate from its people. The hall darkened the wrong amount. The bathroom door cracked open with nothing to push it. Say it, Wesley whispered. No, I said. We use ours. We mumbled our wrongness like drunks saying grace. Dorsh no dorsh mina, dorsh a lawyer, dorsh neku, dorsh door. We laughed, then didn't, because the laugh looked too much like a hook. The front door rattled gently. A politeness. My chest went ice. I took a step and felt paper crinkle inside my jacket. The names touched my ribs. Don't open, Wesley said. I won't. We went to sleep eventually because bodies do that to get their own way. Before I drifted, a message arrived from a number I didn't recognize. A photo. My neighbor Susie, smiling in a kitchen with bad light. The timestamp yesterday. The caption, "Is this your friend? Found her wandering by the riverside. Says she lives near you. She keeps saying door's not for me, and then apologizing to the door frame when she passes through." I stared until the screen made a square in my vision. I typed, "Keep her talking. Keep the lights on. Put shoes in the hall. I'll be there tomorrow." Sleep hit me like a polite door in the face. Morning. Sky a dryer bruise. Tea that tasted like regret. Wesley smoked out the back door and pretended he wouldn't quit. We watched the street, because watching feels like participation. Not Place woke up and didn't, the way towns do when they've learned to do both. People stepped over their own thresholds carefully, as if their houses had learned to spin lies. Somewhere, a kid repeated the sentence, and his mother changed it, and his grandmother shook her head and said the old one because she didn't believe in new tricks. The rhythm is a drug. You can hear it under everything once you've had the first dose. We planned something that looked like a plan and tasted like a confession. We go public, not with the story, with the grammar. We tell people to wrong-mouth the sentence. We tell them to clutter their halls. We tell them to tape door frames, to mislabel thresholds, to give every rectangle an identity crisis. We'd tell them to make mess because the count hates mess. And then we'd live with the guilt when someone did it wrong and got caught. There are no clean strategies in a building like this one. Everything is a hook, even the knife. The council released a statement later saying vandalism to service corridors would be prosecuted. Harrison texted twice. The second time he wrote, "Stop." The third time, "Thank you." The fourth, "They're in my bathroom." I said it wrong, and my wife says it sounds like a song. I said, "Keep singing." At lunch, my phone rang with a number I didn't know and a voice I never thought I'd hear through cable again. "Josh, body, you left mess. You trained me. You can't come back in here for a while," she said. "It's worse now that it knows you'll make more boxes spill. It wants to talk to you properly, and you're not allowed that. You'll think you're the one doing the talking. Can you get time for her?" There was a long space. In it, I could hear the corridor breathe, and behind that, the noise of a kettle refusing to boil. "I can get her name to bounce," she said. "I can get someone to misfile it for a day. Then we'll try again, and again, until the filing cabinet eats me, or I jam my fingers so deep in the tracks they have to call maintenance. They don't have maintenance. "We are maintenance," she said, and laughed, and sounded briefly like we were 12. "Come outside," I said. "Sit on a step. I'll make you tea in a stupid mug I bought at the airport." "I will," she said, and then, the honest thing, "I won't. I'm on shift. I love you." "I know," she said, with the exhausted kindness of the only girl who ever noticed when I lied to myself. "Door's not for us." Yet, the line clicked. The knot room held its breath and let her go back to her stool. We did the boring work. We photocopied. We told our town bad sentences until someone made a Facebook group for them and painted new ones on walls. We left shoes in halls and got shouted at and fined by landlords whose doorways had never looked so inadequate. We confused a count in a corridor that hates being wrong. We bought moments. A few. Names started to slip. People who should have been processed were late to their own absence. Someone turned up in Not Place 3 towns over saying she'd been walking all night through rooms that didn't understand what floors were for. She had a shoe from a shop that never sold her size. She had a stranger's ring stuck on her finger and wouldn't let anyone cut it because she said it was the only proof she'd been. What? The word wouldn't come. The word is the hook. Susie returned to her building. She looked at her door and said, "Door's taken." Then she touched the frame and whispered an apology and went inside sideways like a crab. I made her tea. She called me dear and silly man and asked me how my mother was. She did not ask why I was crying. We paid for all of it by making a thing that hates imprecision live with it. It will adapt. Grammar always does. The dark loves language like a dog loves a leash. We will have to change ours every week. That's a kind of life, I suppose, an evolving wrong prayer. I don't have faith. I have fatigue. It'll do. Tonight, I'm leaving Not Place. Not because I'm running, because I have to get this to whoever will listen before the corridor decides my voice is worth collecting. Wesley and Julianne will stay. They're messy and mean and brilliant and better at this than me. They don't need me in the way I wish they did. That makes me proud and sick. I'll go back to my flat, 2 floors up, 3 steps down, the landing that smells like someone else's dinner. I'll look at my neighbor's door and the shoes she now keeps scattered like a punchline, and I'll be grateful that kindness can learn new shapes. I'll lay the copies of names on my bed, and I'll think about how stupid and human it is to imagine paper can weigh more than a curve of light. I'm going to sleep with every light on, taped door frames, my shoes and a snake on the floor, furniture shoved dumbly into the hall. I will say the sentences wrong until they sound right. I will forget in the morning and hate myself, and then remember before bed, because fear is a good alarm clock. They'll disappear you. And for breaking this rule, I found out where their victims go. I didn't outrun them. I walked in on purpose. I can't unsee the way a curve likes your name. I can't unknow the smell of their breath. Pennies and lemon and the polish from a step in a house where people take off their shoes because they were taught to. I can't stop hearing the chime. I've copied it into my bones. There it goes again. Once, twice. A pattern. The one between floors. The one that tells me I'm due downstairs. They're not knocking. They're at the doorway, patient and polite, and I'm not going to pretend I don't want to look. I'm so tired. The light in the hall just stuttered, then steadied. Kind voice in my head says, "There's nothing in the doorway." I answer it with all the grammar I have left. Door's full. Door's a liar. Door's Elshwir. Door's not for.